Welcome to the Happy Doc. My name is Taylor Brana, a fourth-year medical student and your host. This show is inspired by a simple idea. I think we all have the human capability of being happy in any field of work we are passionate about. Specifically in the world of medicine, there's a growing idea that medicine isn't what it used to be, that there is less and less joy in the practice of this beautiful field whose goal is to help others. As a medical student, I refuse to believe my future as a doctor is mediocre at best. With this mindset, I have launched the Happy Doc, an audio series where I will interview current happy practicing physicians to find out their journey, their tips and tricks, their mindset, and much more to find out what has allowed them to succeed in such a demanding field. Please get your weekly dose of the Happy Doc and gain insight, tools, and strategies to cultivate your inner happiness. Hello, everyone. This is Taylor Brana, and we have an amazing physician on today. Her name is Yami Lancaster. Can you say hi, Yami?
Hi.
Hello. Awesome to have you. I'm just so grateful that you could have the time to offer for this wonderful podcast. And essentially, we're just going to start off with some introductions here. So could you just introduce yourself briefly and your kind of training and your practice, and just give a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Taylor. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. And like I said, my name is Yami, and I am a pediatrician. I live in Yakima, Washington. And I have been practicing pediatrics for 7 years. I grew up in Texas, and I did my medical school at the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine, where at the same time, I also completed a Master of Public Health and a Master of Science in Clinical Research and Education. I then went on to Cincinnati Children's, where I did my pediatric training in the primary care track. And because I was a National Service Corps scholar, after, towards the end of residency, it was time to look for where my real job was going to be. And I ended up here in Yakima. I worked at a community health center for the first 6 years, paying off my time to the National Service Corps. And then after that, I was ready to start my own practice. And I have been practicing at my practice called Nourish Wellness for the past 7 months. And I love it.
Amazing. That's awesome. And, I asked you if you're a happy physician, and absolutely that seems to be the case. And I can almost hear the smile in your voice. So it's really great to have you. Just for the listeners out there, I'm very aware of the National Service Corps, but can you explain why you decided to go down that route and what it offered for you?
Sure. So I heard about the National Service Corps when I was in college, actually. So my husband and I both completed our medical school training together, and he also has a Master of Public Health. So we were together for a long time, the first 2 years, 24/7. And before going into medical school, we knew that there was going to be a high burden of cost to medical training. So we looked into several different options, including the Air Force. We looked pretty seriously into the Air Force, but ultimately we decided to both apply to the National Service Corps. The thing with that program, as you know, they pay your medical school during medical school. So it's not a loan repayment. They pay it at the time, and then they give you a stipend. But you have to go into primary care. Psychiatry is included in that, and OB-GYN is included in that. But basically, it's family practice, internal medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry, and obstetrics gynecology. So you have to go into primary care, and then you have to serve for the number of years that they paid for your medical school. So they paid for all 4 years of my medical school training. They didn't pay for the Master of Public Health and the Master of Science, so those were on me. And halfway through my repayment, they opened it up so that you could do part-time repayment. And so I did 2 years of full-time repayment, and I did 4 years of part-time repayment. So that's why I didn't end up paying for it, and it took 6 years to complete my repayment.
Okay. And was part of the part-time, if you don't mind me asking, was that part of you developing your own practice, or what was going on that made you decide not to necessarily fulfill it right away?
Well, I just really needed some more work life balance. My physician is a full time hospitalist. And right before I decided to go part time, we brought our second child home. He's adopted, and having two boys and trying to juggle everything. And, I'm a physician and a mother, and I have to do all of the other work, the shopping and the cooking and all of the kids' school care and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. So it just was a decision to bring more joy and balance into my life.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I'm sure we can dig into that a little bit because you bring a different flavor into this podcast, which is that having to balance family, with the work, and I don't personally have that experience yet, so it'll be great to understand that a little bit.
Mhm.
With that being said, I guess we'll dig into some questions here. So, would you have considered yourself a happy medical student?
I really loved medical school. I feel like I had a great medical school. I was with my husband. I met some of my best friends in the world during medical school. And I was doing what I had wanted to do my whole life. So I felt very fulfilled. I felt very supported. I didn't really have any times during medical school where I felt like, discriminated against or put down in any way. The hardest rotation was surgery, but even then, I worked with pretty nice surgeons. So I feel very fortunate and very lucky that I had such great medical school training.
That's awesome. So, just asking specifically, I mean, not every student, but a lot of students definitely feel like they've had some dark times or difficulties going through the process. Did you ever feel like you encountered that? And if so, what techniques or what ways did you kind of overcome those difficult times?
Well, I guess in a way it's difficult just because you have to study a lot and your time is not your own, so you're always bound to somebody else's schedule, and you have to follow that, and it gets worse in residency. um,
Yeah.
but I think I was just so excited to try new things and see new things that for the most part I was pretty happy with it. The thing that's always been really difficult for me is sleep deprivation. And I didn't know this until I went to medical school and residency. So it's something that, to me, I'm very sensitive to it, and it starts making me feel very depressed and very anxious. And I have a really hard time controlling my food intake. I feel like I have to be eating all the time when I'm tired. So if the times that I've struggled, both during medical school and residency, has been because of sleep deprivation. And so that's something that I am, especially with work hour rules changing, I'm an advocate for allowing humans to get adequate sleep. I mean, as doctors, we're always telling our patients that they need to sleep more because the truth is that in this country, we are very sleep deprived in general. And it causes a lot of issues for our health and our mental health. But especially for me, I didn't really know that until I had to be subjected to staying up for, 24, 30 hours at a time, that it is so detrimental to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there is something to say about um, how sleep deprivation might affect one person over another, but
Mhm.
I think we can both agree that um, sleep is necessary. So yeah, and there's definitely a big debate currently about how many hours a resident should work, and I think they had just approved the 24 plus 4 hour rule,
Mhm.
which allow. So I don't know that we don't have to get in a debate about that right now, but just an interesting thing for anyone listening to look into as well, and what your views are on sleep, because that's actually a big debate within the medical culture right now.
Mhm.
Um, that's great though. I'm glad you're a happy medical student, and it sounds like how was that transition for you going from the medical student to an intern and resident, and eventually into becoming an attending?
Well, residency was definitely scarier in a lot of ways, and you feel like you have a lot more responsibility. And the first year, it's hard not to feel like you don't know enough, and that you're gonna make a mistake. So the anxiety level definitely went up in residency. So I mean, that was the hardest thing for me in residency, was just feeling like, that tachycardia, especially on the acute rotations, like ICU, or the NICU, the emergency room. Those really fast paced rotations for me were difficult because I would feel a lot of anxiety. I am not the kind of person that thinks very fast on my feet. So I always felt like, oh, I'm going to get something wrong. I'm going to do something wrong. And so that was the most difficult, on top of, being Q4, 30 hours and having 80 to 100-hour work weeks. That was really tough. But I feel really fortunate again, because I just loved my residency program, felt very supported. I felt that at the time we followed all the work hour rules. So I don't feel like there was any violations or anything like that, but it was still, it was tough. Um, but as you go through your training, you learn more and more. And by the end, I felt pretty confident. But transitioning to residency to attending again, you have this dip in your confidence, because you're just like, oh no, now I'm really on my own. Now I don't have an attending around to ask, or a senior resident. So I purposely chose my first job to be a place where I had plenty of mentorship, because for some reason, when you get out there in your first job, you start doubting everything, like double checking Tylenol doses, like weird stuff like that, because you know that you are the be all end all to that patient, in primary care. So it's like, you want to make sure you're not making any mistakes. But I remember one of my mentors in residency telling me it takes 3 to 5 years before you're feeling really comfortable as an attending and you feel like you can handle anything that comes through the door. And she was totally right. It was around my 4 to 5 years that I was just like, okay, I can breathe now. I can relax. I feel good. I feel like I have more experience under my belt, and I feel pretty confident. But those first few years are a little bit nerve-wracking.
So you're saying that anyone going through these transitions should expect to feel nervous, anxious, etc., for a good period of time, up to 5 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're not going to feel like I said, when you first start residency, that tachycardia every day. But you're gonna feel like, oh, I don't know. But it's so that's why for me it was important to be in a place where I could ask my colleagues, and can I just run this by you? Hey, can you look at this rash, and can I run what I'm thinking by you? And so that continues to give you that experience and confidence, because there's no way you can see everything in residency, and I still haven't seen everything. But at least now I have the ability to make a plan in a way that I feel pretty good about it. And I know where my resources are, and that kind of thing. And every time it gets better. But I remember, my first few months when I started my job at the community health center, like I was having stomach aches, and then, that got better. And then when my friend started as an attending a year later, the same thing was happening to her. Like every morning she would wake up with these stomach aches and just nausea. And it was just kind of that worry that, oh my gosh, you have to get used to that new level. You're an attending now.
Right. So, I mean, that's amazing and I really like the point that you made, that we shouldn't expect to feel comfortable initially.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that thought's really powerful, because when you can expect that you're not going to feel good for a while, I think that eases the transition.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really good, and it's great to hear that the confidence is there now. So let me ask you, what do you qualify as happiness? What do you think happiness is to you?
I think for me personally, happiness is the ability to slow down, find moments of peace and stillness in my life, and savor the life I'm living. That feels like happiness to me.
That's awesome. I really like that answer. So how do you develop that in your life?
Well, starting my own practice was, a big step. Going part-time helped a lot, but I still felt like it wasn't quite what I wanted. It wasn't quite my dream. And then starting my own practice has given me a lot of control and feeling like I can be a physician to patients. I can be creative. I can apply ideas that I've had creatively to my practice. But at the same time, I can feel free and feel entitled to be a mother and a wife and to go get massages and to go exercise when I want. So it's just like this balance where you feel this freedom and this peace and that space in between to just really kind of savor and enjoy what I have.
Yeah. Um, what was your sort of breaking point or moment you felt like, like because obviously if work was going well and smoothly, you wouldn't have transitioned to your own practice per se.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that moment, or was a series of moments where you're just like, what, I can't do this. I need to create my own thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, going part-time definitely helped, but working in the traditional setting in modern medicine right now is pretty stressful. I'm a very efficient worker, so I have the ability to see a lot of patients. Still not the numbers that some of my private practice friends are seeing, but 24, 26 patients a day, finishing their notes on the electronic health record and returning phone calls and checking labs and all of those things. So the days are long and my brain would just feel overwhelmed. Like I just couldn't, it was just hard to really think through things. So you end up doing things quicker, like just write a prescription or refer somebody to something because you're not going to have time to think through it yourself. And what I really love doing, one of my favorite things that I love to do is teach and educate and guide my patients, give them the information that they need to make decisions that make them feel good. And it's hard to do that when you only have 7 minutes. So you end up having to shorten things and you don't say everything you want to, and you feel like you left stuff out. And it just didn't make me feel good. I felt like I wasn't practicing authentically, practicing to the level, that was satisfying to me. And I just felt like I had two choices. I could either accept that and that just become a cog in the system and clock in and clock out and be okay with that and get my very, very nice, comfortable paycheck that I had, because I have to admit I was getting paid well. So the financial issue wasn't what was distressing me at all. So I could do that. And I actually tried that for a while. I did. I was like, okay, I'm just going to accept. And I'm just going to clock in, clock out, see my patients, do my work, because I'm efficient. I could get all my notes done and all that kind of stuff and just go home. But it didn't align with my values. So I tried it on for size, and I just had this feeling at the end of the day that I didn't like. And so ultimately, that's when I felt like it wasn't necessarily like, I wasn't miserable. I wasn't in an intense amount of pain. I was just dissatisfied. And I knew that I wanted to try something that felt better to me as a pediatrician, that aligned with the original dream that I had when I was a little girl.
Right. So, and I heard some good points there, and I want you to elaborate a little bit. So what would you tell a physician who's kind of feeling crummy right now, who has values that, they have a grander idea in mind, and they're kind of feeling stuck? What would you tell them, and how would you empower them to let them move forward and maybe look at things and take a chance?
I think the very first step is becoming clear in your vision. And that's what I had to do before I decided to just, bite the bullet and start my own practice. Is just sit down, either journal or draw it out if you're more of a visual person, and decide what it is that you really want. What are you looking for? And if it's not something that you can find in your current practice, then consider starting your own. But it's not necessarily that easy for everybody, because there's a lot of things to consider, as far as supporting your family and finances and and all of that kind of thing. So I would say the first step is just getting clear on your vision.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's a really good point, and I hope anyone listening in will, take that to heart. And this is someone who's successfully doing it, and I aspire one day to open up my own vision, create my own visions, and so it's great to hear someone who's doing it, and an actively practicing physician. That's amazing. Looking back, like even at a younger Yami. What would you tell a younger self? What would you tell yourself, starting off in medical school? What would be information that you wish you had heard earlier or sooner?
Oh my gosh, this is such a great question. I wish I would have had time and ability to do more personal development work. I feel very grateful, and I'm fortunate that after I finished residency and I started here, I've had time to really work on myself, look at some of my habits, look at some of my coping skills, which weren't very good, and see life through a different lens. I have to admit that I had a lot of depressed thinking growing up, even since I was young. I suffered from major depression several times in my life. Um, I managed to avoid medication until I was an attending, and I was briefly on it. But, you know, I feel like if I would have had access to tools that I have now, I could have been even more successful at navigating some of the challenges that were presented to me during medical school, residency, marriage, a baby, interpersonal conflicts, all the stuff that life throws at you, that I feel it's a disservice to medical students because we go straight through. I mean, we study so hard, we work so hard, and we never have time for ourselves, for that self-care and that personal development. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that what I've learned now has been a key factor in my happiness and my joy and my ability to feel peace.
Sure. So now that you kind of opened up that idea, I would ask you, where have you learned some of your tips and techniques and tools? So if someone is interested actively right now, that they could explore these ideas and gain these self-empowerment tools.
I think one of the most powerful practices to me has been meditation. I'm a daily meditator. To me, it's as essential as brushing my teeth. I mean, I just need to have it in my life, and I love it. But that started after I worked with a life coach, actually. And she suggested visualization, which I also practice, and meditation. And so I started working on both of those. And that's kind of when things just really started falling into place for me. I also, because of my depressed thinking, and I've had an issue with body image since I was very young, I also suffered from an eating disorder for decades. And some of the tools that I gained from working with a life coach have really been invaluable to me. So, eating disorders and poor body image, and just generalized disordered eating, are so common, and they can really bring people down and really suck out their energy and their light that they can be spreading to others. So, I really feel like if there's people out there suffering from that, definitely seek help, find a good therapist, or the life coach I worked with actually specifically worked with women with eating disorders. So I was really lucky to find her, and that really just was something that just helped my life take off in just a positive direction.
Wow, that's great, and it doesn't matter, how old you are or where, what position you're in. Sometimes you need help, and it's amazing that you sought it out and then you found results from it, and yeah, that's awesome. And thank you so much for you're sharing these detailed information about yourself, and sincerely I appreciate the fact that you're courageous enough to explore that and explain that to people listening.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I feel like it's important to normalize some of this stuff. Obviously, it's not ideal, but so many people suffer in silence, and they feel like they're the only one. And it's just so common. And I just don't want people to suffer in this way anymore. So that's why I'm just giving you, the listener, permission to go find help. And, you can also, I don't know if you can post my information somehow on the podcast, but people can contact me if they specifically want to know who I've worked with and what programs and techniques I've used to really improve my self-image and the way I deal with food and life.
Sure. And yeah, I'm going to, as long as you're offering, I can embed all that information into the website. So that's fantastic. Moving on to the next question here. What is the current structure of your practice?
So I have a pediatric micro practice and I am solo. So I have no staff at this point. So I do everything myself. I take phone calls when I can answer the phone, schedule appointments, and see my patients out of one room in my practice. And I give all the immunizations and all of that. And I started about 7 months ago, and currently I have almost 100 patients. So I'm a few patients away to getting to 100. But I still work as a pediatrician part-time. I also am a certified Food for Life instructor. I teach cooking classes, and I have another website called Veggie Fit Kids, which I record videos on nutrition for children, plant-based nutrition. So I am involved in a lot of things, which is why it was important for me to be able to balance seeing my patients with, doing all the other creative and fun things that I like to do.
That's amazing. I love the class you teach with kids and the plant-based diet. I think to embed, good knowledge, obviously, this, embedding like good education early on is so essential, at least within my core values and what I think is important. So that's really great. I wanted to ask you, I only familiarized myself with the idea of a micro practice recently. So can you kind of explain what that means?
So basically, a micro practice is just what it sounds like. It's just a smaller version of a pediatric practice. When I was at my former job, even as a part-time physician, my panel was 1,800 patients, which is really frustrating to patients because you can't possibly see all those patients yourself. So I've read lots of different rules of thumb as far as how many patients you end up with. Ultimately, I feel like I'll probably end up somewhere between 200 and 250 active patients. That would be where I would feel full or I would feel busy enough. I see patients 3 days a week currently, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for scheduled patients. However, if a mom calls and her baby's sick and needs to be seen, I can do that on my days that I'm not technically in office, or on evenings, or on weekends. So I make myself available so that parents, if possible, don't have to go into the ER and urgent cares and stuff like that.
And on those on days, how many hours are you working?
So it's about 9 to 5, but I'm pretty flexible. I'm actually going to join Toastmasters, and that's Wednesday mornings. So I'll be in the office a little bit later on those mornings. And Friday mornings, I go to Jazzercise, so I'm in the office a little bit later then. But hey, that makes me super smiley and happy. So I figured it's only an advantage to my patients. So
Yeah, and I want people, especially physicians listening into this, the fact that, Yami is able to see patients, she's able to have exercise, she talks about meditation, and she's providing these educational courses, and that's huge. And these are things that she's still working, and yet she's happy and excited, and you can again feel her energy. So that's amazing. I'm so happy to have you on here. um, what would you say would be the biggest tip you would give to an aspiring student who would want to, join or look into becoming a physician?
Well, I love working with medical students and college students because they have so much optimism and idealism, and it's just really motivating and inspiring. So I say to them, definitely keep the vision strong of why you want to do this, and
Hmm.
uh, just try to remember it as you go through it, because the deeper you get into the training, the harder sometimes it is to remember the original dream, because even if you're surrounded with great doctors, um, sometimes people will discourage you from doing what you really want to do because they don't think it's realistic, or they don't think it's needed, or they think, oh, well, you're going to have to pay back all those loans, so you're going to have to make more money.
Hmm.
So keep that vision strong and shadow happy doctors. They may be harder to find, but I take medical students and even college students at my practice, and they at least get to see me and get to see me smile and try to figure out how to improve my practice. But I just think that we need more people that are happy and optimistic, and um, have their dreams alive. So I would encourage them to just keep pursuing their dreams.
Awesome. And yeah, I think part of the goal of this podcast is to recruit that team of, happy doctors and these more visionary people who can then, offer these rotations. So that'll probably be part of, the fact now I'm exposing you even, to people. So yeah, I'm really hoping we can keep propagating this optimism within the field for sure. Um, what would you say is a common mistake or crime that you see, students or residents or attendings committing on in this path of medicine?
I don't know. I think everybody's on their own journey. I feel like one of the biggest things that happens to people is that they get stuck in the shoulds. And so they make a lot of decisions based upon what they think they should do, or what society or their family or their culture or whatever thinks that they should do. And because of that, they may end up a little miserable or unhappy. So sometimes we have to really use our intuition and really dig down deep to determine what we really want to do and what we really think is going to make us happy, regardless of what we think other people might want us to do.
Wow. I mean, that's really powerful. I'll have to sit with that a little bit. Awesome. Great advice. What was the best advice you've ever received from a mentor? Something that really struck you powerfully and helped you out?
I think what I mentioned before is my mentor at my primary care clinic. Um, in residency, that she told me that it was going to take me a while to feel really confident as an attending. I'm really glad she told me that, because otherwise I think I would have felt like I was a failure, or that there was something wrong with me, or that I was never going to feel confident as an attending. So I'm really glad she told me that, because it kind of helped reaffirm that things were going just as they should.
Sure. Awesome. Um, are there any favorite books, authors, bloggers, or materials that you follow that you feel have inspired you and allowed you to more self-actualize and do the work that you want to do?
Mm. There's so many. I'm actually currently almost done with The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. I think I told you about that. I love the book. I can't wait to apply all the techniques in there. But one thing that I subscribed to a long time ago when I started with the life coach, which has helped me a ton, is Totally Unique Thoughts by Mike Dooley. It's TUT.com. And you can go to that website and you can put in your name and kind of like your visions, like what your dream is. And you get a daily email Monday through Friday, which is like the universe talking to you. And some people may think it's like super cheesy, but especially when you're having a hard day or you're feeling down on yourself, when you get that email telling you that you're awesome and that everything is going the way it should be, it just really lifts you up. And then every few months it'll incorporate your dream into the little thing it emails you, and it's just so cool because I wrote, so this was probably like 3 or 4 years ago, before my full vision was clear, but I had written in there that I wanted a creative, successful um, kids business or something like that. And then it recently came back up and it's like, Yami, do you have your creative, successful kids business yet? And I was like, yes, I do. and it was just so cool. I mean, things like that. I mean, it's not for every personality type, but for people that are like me, I think it's really fun. And all of the work, watching The Secret, is really great. That documentary. So those are the kind of things I like.
Amazing. So yeah, and I'll definitely type out some of these websites and authors so people can see it later. What would be, let me ask you, how would you improve current medical culture? What are we missing in present day medical culture that you think needs to be said?
I think we're missing flexibility and variety. I think one of the things that frustrates me the most is that, and I don't know if maybe it's because I live in a small town, there's this kind of feeling of like, well, we've always done things this way, so we should continue to do things this way. And naturally, as humans, we're afraid of change, and I can accept that. But there's so many creative solutions to the healthcare crisis that we're having now. Um, and I think also to try to reinforce joy and happiness in people, that actually that's a thing we should have and that we should aspire to. We should aspire to be happy. It shouldn't be like this guilty sin to be happy. Like, it should be that everybody should strive to be happy, and should strive to find a work-life balance that suits them. So I think that sometimes, because we've, quote, always done it this way, it doesn't allow any space to try those creative solutions for working moms, working dads, people that have lots of energy and want to try different things. There's not enough space. And then the second thing that's hugely important to me is to start looking at things upstream, to start doing some more upstream thinking. Obviously, we have a crisis in that we have a very high number of people with chronic disease, and the system is overburdened and it's collapsing, but there's not enough people addressing prevention and actual reversal of disease, which we now have plenty of evidence to show that diet and lifestyle is not just diet alone, but diet and lifestyle can prevent and potentially reverse chronic disease. So why aren't more doctors being supported to do that work? And so that's one of the reasons I had to leave too, is because that's hugely important to me. And it's not something that fits the traditional treadmill model of medicine.
Right.
So those are the two things I would say, is like, let's let some creative people try some things, either to increase their happiness or to increase quality patient care. And let's start putting more people assigned to the upstream battle.
Right. And even as a medical student, I've noticed this kind of reactive approach. So yeah, I completely agree. I think there we need to flip things around a little bit. So that's great to hear those points of view. In an ideal world, how would you train a pre-medical student or a medical student or a resident going into training as opposed to what it is currently?
Well, I know that there are some medical students that are already, or medical schools that are already doing it differently. But I think getting students immersed in the real world sooner, so that they can apply what they're studying to real life situations, would be really helpful. I mean, I did it the old fashioned way of like 2 years of like straight up book study, anatomy lab and that kind of thing, and not really touching or seeing a patient until third year. And I know more medical schools now are starting to integrate being in the offices and in the hospitals earlier, but I think that there should be a way to integrate that all throughout medical school training so that the learning is more applicable and it just makes more sense to our brains. I think that would help a lot. Are you still there?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. It kind of sound like you dropped out. So
okay.
Awesome. No, it's fine. I thought you were still going. Awesome. And I completely agree. I think we need that does make sense that like to because especially when I remember my first and second year, I did it the same way, the 2 years and 2 years of book study and then clinical rotations. And it's really tough to get a sense of these diseases if you don't actually see them. But it's one thing, for example, if I see heart failure and then I study about it, because I can associate that image and feel and look and patient with what I'm reading. And I think the more we can put a face to the symptoms and the disease processes we're seeing, it really assimilates it more effectively. So.
And then definitely, just to reiterate what I've said before, is we need more education on diet and lifestyle. And because there's plenty of evidence, there's plenty of studies out there, and it's just not being taught to medical students. And medical students are hungry for this knowledge. And I've taught my cooking class at the medical school here in Yakima, and the students loved it. And I feel that that's something that's immediately applicable. You can go out, you may not know specific pharmaceuticals or dosages or any of that, but you can immediately go out and start counseling people about their diet and lifestyle and start applying that to your own life as well. So I think that integrating that in a serious way, not just some like 1 hour of nutrition that focuses on pathology, but really help students and residents feel more optimistic about the future, that we can tackle this in a way that's realistic and that can change the course of chronic disease in the United States.
Beautiful. I am 100% with you. I think if they embedded even like brief cooking classes or healing nutrition kind of ideas, that would be amazing. With that being said, I think you've answered all the main questions I really wanted to ask you today. Is there any additional information you wanted to share to this wider audience, whether it be a student, a resident, an attending physician, or the greater community at large?
So I just want to remind everybody that you have a special light within you. And even though you don't need permission, I'm going to give you permission to shine your light and shine it in the way that makes sense to you, because you never know how that might impact people around you. And so I just really feel like it's important for all of us to come out of our shells and to try to live a life that's authentic to us and that matches and aligns with our values, and to try to find joy and peace in our lives. And so I hope that more people feel empowered to do that after listening to this podcast. And you can definitely contact me with questions, and don't feel discouraged if I don't answer right away. Sometimes it takes me a few days. But shine your light and try to pursue the happiness that whatever happiness means to you, try to find it.
Amazing. And Yami, you are just an example of happiness and joy. And it's not this stagnant thing, you're still constantly learning, and you just explained that you're following, this audiobook or book that you're reading. And so it's not just you reach a certain point and it's done, and you're still cultivating that happiness. And it's just great to see your growth. And I'm so happy to have you here and to speak. It's amazing. So to all the listeners, this is again Yami Lancaster. She's given her time, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Taylor. It was my pleasure.
And there you have it, folks. That's the end of the episode for today. If you want to check out any more material, go to www.thehappydoc.com. Also, if you'd like to provide feedback, ask any questions, please comment on the blog posts or send an email to thehappydoc1@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope you have a great week. Take care.